Rybone here, back with another one. I want to thank everybody for subscribing to the channel. I now have 5,000 subscribers. That's certainly a good number. I never really expected to have that many from just me sitting here showing hacking videos. But thank you guys. Please keep liking and subscribing the videos. It certainly helps the channel grow. Of course, I still have to maintain a day job and teach for SANS. So keep it coming though. It's a fun little side thing for me. All right. So today we're going to talk about Cloudflared. Cloudflared is a service provided by Cloudflare. Cloudflared is a tunneling mechanism that they provide to allow you to tunnel through their service, right? Much like ngrok, much like MS Dev tunnels, things we've talked about in the past. I have seen adversaries use this in real attacks. So I want to explain to you from a red team perspective how you could use this as a red teamer to emulate the adversary, as well as talk about some detection for this. It's pretty easy to detect its usage, but people aren't looking for it and it will slip by EDR. So let's start here. What we're going to take a look at first is I have an interactive beacon, right? When I say beacon, I mean Cobalt Strike. I have Cobalt Strike installed on a host in the network. Assume they clicked a fish and I was able to escalate to a high-level shell, right? It's not that crazy. I have one host inside this network. Now I want to move towards the domain controller or towards, higher level assets, right? I'm trying to laterally move at this point, but I don't want to use Cobalt Strike. Why? It's too well fingerprinted. Too many EDRs eat it. Too many things are out there about Cobalt Strike, right? I want to use something different. So what I'm going to use is Cloudflared, and I'm going to turn this host that we've compromised into a proxy so I can proxy through it to attack other things. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to use Cloudflared and we're going to proxy through this host to be able to connect to it from anywhere. All right. So we'll start with our Cobalt Strike beacon. We're just imagining we got the interactive shell. We've done some escalation. I haven't done a lot of recon. I don't even know what the domain name is, right? So how would I figure that out? I would first do shell. Whenever you're doing a command in a beacon, you have to do the word shell first. So we'll do shell. We'll do who am I? And then we're going to do /fqdn. And that's going to give us our fully qualified domain name. So I can say, okay, I am Clint Barton. I am part of the users OU and I'm part of hacklab.com. Great. Well, I want the domain controller, right? So what's the domain controller? There's a couple ways I can do this. I can get the domain controller name just by doing echo %logon server %, or I can do nltest. nltest gives me more information, but I have to have already known the base domain name. So we'll do first nltest. Well, we have type shell, nltest, and then we're doing ds get dc. And this is a slash in front of this. And then we do :hacklab.com. And we can see right now, here's the IP address of that host. And here's its fully qualified domain name. So now I know what the domain controller is. Pretty awesome, right? So I can do a few other things. I can do net commands, of course, for enumeration. And just realize, if I'm doing these, adversaries are doing these too. You should have detections for people running nltest. You should have detections for all of these that I'm running, right? So if we do net local group, we can see the local groups. What I'm interested in is the administrators group here. So we'll do net local group administrators. And we can see, it looks interesting. So we have a Tenable service account on here. What that usually means is that something on here is probably part of a vulnerability scanner. And you guys have heard me talk about this before. If you can get the hashes of a vulnerability scanner, you are in business because they're going to have the ability to move around. They have to. And most organizations don't set passwords, per subnet that they're scanning, right? They just give it one and they let it scan everywhere. In a lot of cases, it's a domain admin. So in this case, because this is a lab, I've set it as a domain admin because I've run into this many times where it's configured as a domain admin. Now, how do you stop this? Use agents, right? If you use Tenable1 or Tenable.io, if you use the agent, these credentials aren't flying around your network, right? They have to have high-level credentials to be able to scan. So at minimum, if I find a vulnerability scanner, I'm going to be able to move laterally. I might not be able to get all the way into the domain controller, but I'm going to be able to move laterally. Okay, so now that I've found this account on here, I'm going to assume it's logged in fairly recently. So we do log on passwords now. This runs the Mimikatz module within Cobalt Strike. Now, I have found many times this is where EDR will eat you because you're touching LSAS. But at this point, you may have enough to continue. As long as it doesn't completely kill you off or you have a backup shell, you're in business. So now if we go to View and Credentials, we have the hash for that Tenable service account. We'll note that we're going to need that later because we're going to try to RDP into the domain controller using this hash. We're going to pass the hash and RDP into the domain controller. So let's go back to our beacon now. Now we're going to set up this host as a proxy, right? We know that this host has the ability to reach the domain controller because we've been interacting with it. We can do pings. We could do network sweeps. Why not? We'll just do port scan. And then we have 192.168.136.10. And this will task the beacon to scan the domain controller. And we can see what ports are open here. We can see 3389, but we also know it's a domain controller because we're seeing 88, which is the Kerberos port, and port 53, which is DNS, which domain controllers are always going to have DNS open, and they're always going to have 88 open right now. This is TCP 53 though, which is interesting. You don't have to have that open, but you should. It can break DNS if you don't have that open, but we know that this is a domain controller, right? Pretty simple to determine given these ports being available. All right, so let's do our proxy. So what we want to do first is we want to do some netshell commands to find out if port proxies are already enabled. They probably are not, but you never know. So we'll go ahead and do shell netsh interface port proxy show all. And what this is going to do is show us if there's any port proxies already configured. And you should get 0 output here. The next thing we want to do is we want to see if forwarding is enabled. In this case, it probably will be enabled because I've done this demo a couple times just to make sure it works. But if I paste in this command, and notice if I'm running PowerShell from a beacon, I have to write the word PowerShell in front of it. I do get net IP interface and select, and I can select all these things. All you really need to select is this forwarding here. You don't have to select connection state, address family. I just like to get this information because it makes a nice table. So if I enter this, once the beacon returns, we can see forwarding is already enabled on all of these interfaces, which forwarding must be enabled for you to be able to proxy through this host. Now, if you want to turn forwarding on, right, if it's set to disabled, you simply do this command. We'll do PowerShell here. And then you do set net IP interface forwarding enabled. And then if you rerun the other command, you can see that forwarding is enabled on all of the interfaces after the fact. So we got forwarding enabled. Now we need to start the remote access service. This is installed on every version of Windows. You just quite simply need to start this. So if you're within PowerShell still, you can do many different methods to start this service, but I just like to do this simple PowerShell one-liner. And I'm setting the remote access service startup type and starting it, and the output, you just won't really get anything, but it'll start, right? If you don't get any output, you know it started. It would give you an output if it failed. So now we want to create our port proxy. Our port proxy is going to be using some NetExec commands to create that. And we want to create some high ports, whatever we want to use for our redirection. So in this case, I'm going to use port 3000 and port 3001. So the first command I'm going to do shell, and then I'm going to do NetExec interface port proxy add v4 to v4. I'm going to give it a listen port of 3000. And what I want to do is target the domain controller with this on port 3389. So what I'm doing is I'm setting this to target the domain controller. So I'm coming through this host, hitting this host, then going to the domain controller through Cloudflared, which I'll show you how to do in a little bit. But first we need these proxies. Okay, that one completed. We're then going to do another one for SMB. Very same thing. We just do shell again. And now we're going to do 3001 to port 445 for SMB. So that way we can connect via SMB. Little known thing about domain controllers. If you're running a modern domain controller, you cannot do RDP because of restricted admin. So you actually have to turn restricted admin off to be able to do RDP on, say, a Linux host, right? So we're using X3 RDP here to do pass the hash here in a little bit. You have to turn off restricted admin, but I'll show you how to do that. Okay, our proxies are now in. So what we want to do, we want to do our shell show NetExec interface port proxy show all. And we're showing all now. And now we have our proxy. We have port 3389 and port 445. When those are available, they will redirect to these addresses. So essentially, we've set up our host as a NAT. It takes that traffic and redirects it over to the domain controller when it comes in and hits this port right here, 3000 or 3001. So we're basically turning it into a router, right? Not that crazy. All right. In some cases, you will need to add rules to the firewall. In this case, we do not. Because Cloudflared is a local process, you don't have to add rules to the firewall. Adding rules to the firewall is typically a dead giveaway, right? Some of this stuff will slip by, but adding rules to the firewall is a dead giveaway that, you're probably going to get caught, right? Everybody looks for NetExec and the firewall rule add command because it's just not commonly used. But the NetExec port proxy commands, maybe, probably going to slip by most DDRs with that, but not the adding a firewall rule. That behavioral, somebody's going to get you with that one. So we're not going to do that in this case because we don't need to. Now what we want to do is install Cloudflared. So to do so, first we need to download the binary. And downloading the binary, not that crazy. This is a signed binary. EDR is not going to do anything with it. It doesn't care. So we're going to download this binary and we'll do PowerShell here. And this is a fairly long command. You can see I'm just reaching out to Cloudflared. I'm getting Cloudflared Windows AMD 64.exe and I'm outputting to local low cloudflared.exe. You can do the MSI here. You can install it via the MSI. You can use the executable. Doesn't really matter, because it's going to install a service, and that service will connect back to Cloudflared. So I'm going to go ahead and enter this, and then I'm going to pause the video here because this takes a while to download. It's a pretty big download. So I'm going to go ahead and start this command, and then I'm going to go ahead and pause. So I'll be back in just a second. All right, we're back. As you can see, I went ahead and installed the Cloudflare host on the host after it downloaded. So I entered this shell command here. We just run the Cloudflare service install. Now, if you want to know exactly how to do this, Cloudflare tells you how to. You come into your application, you choose your operating system, and you literally just copy out the command. If you copy this right here and you paste it in, it will install the service and connect as it's supposed to. Okay, now that Cloudflare is installed, we no longer need Kali, and we no longer need basically anything. We can use any computer that Cloudflare is connected to reach into our host, right? I can completely abandon Cobalt Strike here. I can remove my beacon. I can do whatever I need to do, and I will still have access to this host to reach the domain controller on 3389 and on 445. So just to demonstrate that, I'm going to come back straight here to my Mac. My Mac is not even connected to this lab whatsoever. It is completely outside of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect Cloudflare here, and we're going to tunnel direct from my Mac out to that host. So what we're going to do to start is I'm going to do our Cloudflared access. Give me just 1 second here. And I'm going to do access for our port 3001 that we set up for SMB. And so we'll start here. And we're going to do Cloudflared access TCP hostname SMB Black Spire Security port 3001. And I'm going to go ahead and put sudo in front of this just to make sure it maps right. And there we have a WebSocket listener started on 3001. Now what we want to do for each of these is we want to make sure that we have 4 tabs. We're going to need one for the port, and then we're going to need to be able to redirect the port, right? 3001 for most tools does not equate SMB. So what we need to do is equate that port automatically. We can redirect to our redirection. I know it's a little crazy, but this is one of the best ways to do it. So if we want to redirect SMB now, we can use Socat. You can use Netcat, but I prefer Socat in this particular instance, just because it will redirect 4445 to my tunneled host. So if I do this, in a second, we should have a redirect. It may not tell me, but it looks like it's going because it didn't give me an error. So how do we test this? We can now do nmap-a-pn, tell it not to ping. And we do 127.0.0.1, and then we give it the ports, not port 3000, but the port that we would normally look for, port 445. And we'll let this go, and it should try to go through Socat, and we can see the connection for Socat, and that should be sending it down the tunnel. So this may take just a second here because it's literally scanning over the web through Cloudflare all the way back for port 445. But it does look like it worked. As we can see here, Windows Server 2016 Data Center. The host I had that beacon on was not Windows Server 2016 Data Center. This is the domain controller, right? And the host name is 2016 Lab DC. So our Cloudflare tunneling is working. This is what adversaries do. They do this particular task. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we'll do 2 more windows. Now we're going to do 3389 because we want to be able to pass the hash into the host and get an RDP session. So I'll go ahead and clear this out. And we're going to do another session here for RDP on port 3000. So we will do our sudo, paste in our command here. Okay, we have our WebSocket listener. We'll need one more for our Socat connection. Now we're going to do 3389. Okay, looks like we have our Socat connection. And now we're going to do one more scan for RDP. Oh, must not have that in here, so we'll do the RDP. We'll just do nmap-a-pn 127.0.0.1, and then we'll do port 3389, just like that. And it's going to take me over here to force me to authenticate. This is how you know Cloudflare tunneling is working when you're actually accessing an interactive application. Let me just put this in real quick. It's going to send me a code via email. Hopefully it's quick. If it's not, I'll pause it again. Looks like it sent it to me. I paused it there because the authentication email was taking a bit of time, but now I have a successful login to Cloudflare. If we go back over to our Nmap connection, you can now see that we were successful in running down our tunnel. We can see our target name of Hack Lab, 2016 Lab DC, and 3389 is open. So what does that mean? What exactly happened here? We tunneled, we hit Socat. We redirected Socat to Cloudflared. We sent it down the Cloudflared tunnel. We hit the Windows 10 host and we redirected that to the domain controller. Yes, I know it's crazy, but you can basically redirect any port with this particular method through a host to hit any host in the network. So it's viable, and EDR doesn't say a thing when this happens. So what we're going to do now is we're going to first disable restricted admin, and then we're going to do RDP. So we're going to do NetExec SMB 127001 Tenable SVC Hack Lab. This is our hash. We got our hash over here from what we had compromised. Then we're going to do reg add hkey local machine system current control set control LSA, and we're going to add disable restricted admin here. This is the exact same command you would use with crackmap exec, but we're just simply adding a registry key that disables restricted admin. By default, you cannot pass the hash with RDP. But if you have access to that system and the hash, you can do this via SMB. That's why I mapped this through. So this one has been kind of iffy, so it may fail a couple times. I'll try it. If it fails, we'll run it again. It should eventually succeed. So let's give it a second here. There we go. Phone, and it errored, but let's try it again. Very strange. This exact command worked a minute ago. There we go. Who knows? Maybe it needed this sudo. I don't know. It must have been trying to do something weird that it needed admin prep for. But there, operation completed successfully. Very strange with NetExec, but of course this is NetExec installed on my Mac. It's not my normal tool. I'm just using something different to show you that this tunnel works. So now that we have that done, we should be able to RDP into this host remotely. So quite simply, what we need to do now is we're going to, it's not in my hidden commands. I know I did this a minute ago. We'll clear this one out. And we're going to do x3 RDP. We're going to pass the hash with x3 RDP. So we'll do sudo. Then we're going to do x3 RDP. We're going to go to 127.0.0.1. Our user is the Tenable service, and we're going to pass the same hash that we used a minute ago. Now we should be able to do RDP into our domain controller. So we'll do this. And we want to accept the certificate. And it didn't pop up in this window, but over here, minimize that. Over here, not sure why it's doing that. It did show the login. There we go. So that is your domain controller. Adversaries are doing this. So how do we detect this stuff? We can take a look at our SIM over here real quick. Just quite simply look for event, code 4688 and Cloudflared. The adversary that I saw did not change this. They did not change the name of the service. So we'll have to extend our time frame here though. Not last 15 minutes, probably last 7 days. Well, let's see if we've got the event codes whatsoever. I've been having a little trouble with this sim. So we've got 4688, our event code. If host 2 Win10 is logging it. So we'll find the actual process name. So we'll do and process.name cloudflared.exe. And now we have Cloudflared right there. So this is the detection for Cloudflared, right? If you see anything in your network running cloudflare.exe, you probably want to look into that. That is not normal, right? Of course, the detection for Cobalt Strike, quite common. You could have detected the net commands that I ran. You could have detected who am I. So we'll do who am I. Oh, I misspelled that. Who am I? Right there, you can see who am I was run. That's not a common command. Most admins aren't running this. So there's quite a few pieces that you can do detection on. I would highly suggest that you start looking for Cloudflared. Adversaries are using this. You can also look for the service install, right? So if you go event code 7045, and we'll just search Cloudflared, just like that. Well, that's not the same syntax that it used to be. We want to do event code 7045. We're going to look for it right there. That's right there, service agent. So if you look for a service name, basically contains Cloudflared. So we go and you just want to do like Cloudflared star, something like that. Star. It's going to be Vicky. Right there. There's your Cloudflared service installation. So event code 7045 and service name Cloudflared. That's what you want to look for. That's the default. Of course, they can change that. But with those two detections, you're in a good place from a purple perspective. You can detect adversaries doing this in your network. All right. Thanks once again for the 5,000 subscribers. Keep liking, keep subscribing. It helps the channel, helps me. I can keep doing these videos for you if you like and subscribe. Thank you. Thank you for an awesome 2024. And hopefully you guys have a great 2025. Thank you.